I'm undecided exactly how I want to do these recruiting videos going forward. I just know that I want to start talking a bit more about recruiting from a team standpoint. Up until this point, I've done the highlight tape evaluations. I love doing them. I'm going to start doing them again in October as there's more senior year film out there. But in those videos, I make an effort to not talk about these kids recruiting, right? I try to not speculate on the recruitment status or the commitment status of the kids in those videos just because it changes so often. And I try to keep those videos about the kid and how good of a football player they are and not really talk about them as Alabama commits going forward. I want to start doing that in these kind of videos starting now, talk about Cederian Morgan not only as a recruit, not only as a high school football player, but as an Alabama Crimson Tide commit in 2026. So we're going to start doing that a bit more. In the meantime, if you guys have any suggestions about how you want these videos to be done, you guys are the ones watching this stuff, so you got to reach out and let me know. Like, comment if you like this kind of stuff so I know to keep doing it. So today we're going to go position by position and then talk about how Alabama's done in the 2026 class and how I think they should treat it going forward. I think next time I do this kind of video, it's going to be on the heels of some kind of big commitment or decommitment or some kind of big development. Hayes Fawcett just tweeted out 2 Alabama emojis, 2 elephants, 2 big Al emojis. So there might be something coming Alabama's way in the near future, but we'll talk about that when it happens. Right now, we're just going to go position by position, just so you know this depth chart's not completely accurate. I didn't go out of my way to redshirt kids, so a lot of these guys that aren't playing in 2025 will redshirt, and they'll have an extra year of eligibility. I just wanted to make sure we got the seniors out of the picture so we could just talk about who's going to be on this roster in 2026. So we're going to start with this quarterback room. Ty Simpson's having a great season. Even after the Florida State game, watching the film back, he didn't look like the reason that offense wasn't moving the ball. So I think we're seeing that the past 2 weeks. Everything's kind of caught up to Ty Simpson's speed, and we can feel really good about this offense in 2025. And I'm excited to see how Ty Simpson finishes out this season. He looked very impressive on the road. I don't think this Georgia defense is as good as it's been in year past, but it's still a Kirby Smart. It's still a Glenn Schumann defense. It's not like, I'm not too. I think Ty Simpson played a really good game on the road. I'm excited to watch him going forward. Anyways, there's no question in my mind that this is Keelan Russell's quarterback room going forward. This dude is such a special talent. I think it's very much a good thing that Ty Simpson's emergence can have you feeling good about Ty Simpson in 2026. I hate the way that we treat these quarterback recruits and how we feel like, oh my God, if they don't start in their first 2 years, they're bust. That's not how quarterback development works. That's not how it's ever worked. That's just how the media thinks it works. These kids have to sit and learn a college offense. It's not an easy thing. What we're seeing from Malik Washington at Maryland, what we're seeing from, I'm not even going to try to pronounce this dude's last name, Key Sagalatoa at Cal, very rare. I don't think you're going to see these. You don't see that often. Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is I would be more excited about Keelan Russell going forward just because of how good Ty Simpson's been, because that's going to give Keelan Russell more time to not feel that political pressure to actually play him. So I'm very excited for Keelan Russell going forward. This 2026 quarterback class is very interesting. I like these 2 kids that are committed, Tate Kawa and Jet Tamala. I like Tate Kawa a lot. I've been watching a lot of Utah film, a lot of the Orem, Utah film of Tate Kawa, and I really like the upside with him. I just don't think these are 2 kids that are going to push for a starting job in 2026, which is fine. That's the point of the quarterback position. I think in 2027, you're going to see them be a bit more aggressive. I got into it with an Alabama fan about this, and where I was like, yeah, you're not going to see him bring in a 5-star in 2026 just because they have Keelan Russell in 2025. I'm not saying that they're going to punt on 2026. Just with NIL, it doesn't make that much sense to, be all in on a kid in 2026 when you have that guy already starting for 2 years ahead of him. It's just a bit more economical to spend that money in 2 years. So I think you'll see them bring in a big-time kid in 2027. But as far as 26 is concerned, do they end up bringing in both Jet Tamal and Taikawa? I don't see why not. Sure, both good quarterbacks. So talk about this running back room. Going to be graduating Dre Washington and Jam Miller after this upcoming season. This is kind of an interesting situation. I really like what we've been seeing out of Kevin Riley this season. They got names in here. A.K. Deer, I think we're going to start seeing an expanded capacity going forward. Excited about him. I really like Xavier Griffin. This is a kid that reclassed this 2026 commit. Was supposed to be in the class of 27 from Jackson, Alabama. Dude, his first game of the season, he had to sit out for some amateurism thing. I'm not exactly sure on the details of that whole situation, but his first game, he went crazy. Something like 300 yards. Really excited about him. This is a kid that that plays a lot more older than he is. I don't know how to really make that sound like it makes sense, but the vision, the patience that Xavier Crowell has for a 17-year-old, I can't wait to see him in Crimson. And then Javari Burnett's another guy I like, Tampa Bay Tech, more of a souped up, run through tackles type build. But as far as this running backs room's concerned, I don't really think you feel any pressure to bring in another guy. That might be a transfer portal thing, depending on who's here in 2026, but I like the 2 kids they have committed. There were 5 minutes in and I'm only 2 positions. I got to speed up, but just talk about this wide receiver room really quick. I really like the way that college teams recruit wide receiver. It's like the one position where they just seem to stack talent every year. I don't think that you can look at what Alabama has committed and feel good. Oh, they're not going to be aggressive. Fuck that. If they can go and get one of these top 5 stars, one of these high-rated 4 stars, maybe these kids that start making some jumps their senior year, I definitely think you'll see them be aggressive. Talk about who they have committed. Cederian Morgan, one of the best wide receivers in the country. Really like the physical skill set that he has. Some of the best ball skills in the country as well. I think that's a kid that you can feel good about contributing right away, but I don't feel the same about Brian Williams and Owen Cable. Now, I think these 2 kids, Brian Williams, Owen Cable, going to be really good wide receivers. It just might not be until 2027, until 2028 till we start talking about them. But, Brian Williams, I really like the traits that he has. Tight end's a room that you can look at, and I think you can feel pretty confident that they're going to bring in another name or 2. Right now, they're slated to lose Cuevas, Knutson, and Dalton won't be back on this roster in 2026. So right now, you only have Max Sutter committed, and I'm not trying to say, it's only Max Sutter. This is a very high-end tight end prospect. I'm really close to saying this is the best tight end in 2026. I do think the kid from Modern Day that's committed to USC is really good, but, Max Sutter from Illinois, really good receiving tight end. I would like to see them bring in a bit more of a inline tight end, a guy that can kind of specialize in blocking. I really like Marshall Pritchett, but just talking about number-wise, it's just not that many guys in this tight end room, especially graduating. You actually have 4 coming off, 3 on scholarship going into 26. So I do think you'll see them bring in another name or 2, and I don't think it'll be a skill set similar to Max Sutter. It might be a guy that's a bit more of a physical presence, a bit more of a strength presence, and a bit less of a wide receiver. I'd just like to see them bring in another inline guy in 2026. I'm going to skip this offensive line just because I'm kind of running low on time again, but just talking about this defensive line, I think if you're going to leave this video with any semblance of what is King Cole's opinion on this Alabama 26 class, it's very good right now. I think they're going to have to bring in some more names quantity-wise on this defensive line. I like the kids they have committed in 2026, but just taking a look at the names, there's a lack of names on this defensive line for Alabama, and I do think that, you watch the games live, I do think that's an area of improvement for Alabama going forward. Now, it's a bit misleading. Quay Rasaw plays that Wolf position. That's what Xavier Griffin's going to contribute when he gets into Tuscaloosa. That Wolf position is like a defensive lineman, but I just still think quantity-wise, you're going to see some more names brought in on this defensive line. And, maybe this is a transfer portal priority this offseason. But as far as this 2026 class is concerned, I think Jamari Matthews, Cam Johnson are good football players. I just think that they need more depth. I mean, you just take a look at the way Georgia recruits. I know it's a different team, but they have 7 commits on this defensive line in 2026. 7, we have only 2 right now listed at defensive end and then 2 defensive tackles. So we'll see, I do think leaving this position, that's the one that looks a bit scarce right now. I'm just going to wrap up with the 2 kids on this defense that I think are going to contribute in 2026. Kids that are committed right now that are going to contribute in 2026. First one, Xavier Griffin, was originally committed to USC in January, ended up decommitting. It seemed like he's going to go to Georgia. That was the in-state program, ended up committing to Alabama this summer. This is a kid that's going to contribute in 2026. The question is just a bit like, what is he going to do at the next level? With these kind of linebacker prospects, you can go watch the film, let me know what you think, but usually the answer is he's going to be a inside linebacker on the obvious running downs and then a bit more of a pass rusher on the obvious passing downs. I think that's what we're going to see with him. I just don't really trust him to set the edge consistently on the obvious pass rushing downs, but when we talk about Xavier Griffin, what he does as an elite prospect, it's get after the quarterback, so explosive. Really like the traits as a pass rusher that we get from Xavier Griffin, and I think we'll see that in 2026 for sure with him. I think Xavier Griffin's going to be a good football player in 2026. I think Cederian Morgan is going to contribute as well. But if you're going to ask me who's going to be the best player as the true freshman in this 2026 class, I think it's a very easy answer, and it's Jireh Edwards. This is a very big recruitment Alabama landed. You talk about Xavier Griffin, yeah, big recruitment, but he's from Georgia, kind of a local guy. Cederian Morgan from Benjamin Russell in Alabama, big recruitment, 2 big recruitments they won, don't get me wrong, but but, two local guys at the end of the day. Jireh Edwards is not a local guy. Maryland, I got the map of the United States, like, behind me right now, and I was going to go... Maryland's not too close to Alabama. That's a pretty big recruitment that they won to land Jireh Edwards. This is the best kid, I think, in 2026 that's committed. He's also the kid that's going to contribute the most. You take a look at who Alabama has on the roster right now. I think Jireh Edwards is going to be the Husky, the nickelback starter in 2026. He's such a physical football player. Just checks the boxes athletically. I watch a lot of recruiting, and, it's up to you guys if you think I know what I'm talking about or if I don't. It's up to you guys to decide that. But, Jireh Edwards is one of those guys. If I'm wrong about him, I have no idea what I'm talking about because, he just checks the boxes of what you look for in a nickelback. But, yeah, I guess this wasn't really an update, but, that's just my thoughts on Alabama's 26 class. It's the number 4 in the country, and I think it's only going to keep getting better. The actual players they have committed, really good football players. You guys let me know what you think. I don't come on here. The reason I have this channel is not so I can come on here and, oh my God, I know so much about recruiting, and, I'm telling you guys what's what. It's just more to open the conversation, and, that's my thoughts on what Alabama has committed in 2026, and I'm more interested in hearing what you guys have to say than, listening to myself, what I have to say. But you guys let me know. Thanks for watching.